Back to follow-up segment tonight. As you may know, Congressman Barney Frank and I shot it out last week when the congressman wouldn't take any responsibility for the meltdown at Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. In any private industry, you're out. In any private concern, you're out on your butt. But not here in the federal government. You can come in and make every excuse in the world, blame everybody else in the world, and then call me boring.
I'm not going to be bullied by your ranting. You can rant all you want. You're not going to shut me up.
All right. Frank, of course, the chairman of the House Finance Committee. Now, not only did the congressman have oversight on Fannie Mae for the past 2 years, but back in the 1990s, he had an affair with a guy named Herb Moses, an executive at Fannie Mae. At the time, Frank was on the House Banking Committee. Joining us now from D.C., Fox News Washington Deputy Editor Bill Salmon. So why should we care 10 years ago? That's when, and I guess it was a long-term relationship between these two men. Why should we care about that?
Well, because that's when the seeds of today's crisis were sown, Bill. I mean, Barney Frank on your show talked about how he supported, reform legislation in 2007, 2008. It was too late by then. I mean, by the time the legislation that kicked in July 30th of this year was passed, Fannie and Freddie stocks had dropped 80% so far this year. So the housing market was already in a meltdown. We're talking in my story about, and what you're referring to, Barney Frank and his relationship with Herb Moses, that happened during the 90s when Republicans, and even in some cases President Clinton, was trying to put regulations on Fannie and Freddie. Barney Frank was backing off these efforts. Meanwhile, his partner was an executive in Fannie Mae, and he was charged with basically loosening mortgage regulations.
Okay. Now, Frank at the time was on the committee, but not the chair. And, he had a voice, but he's a voice of many. When he gets to be the chair in 2007, Frank says, hey, I tried to get something done. I put this oversight thing in. It finally got passed, but it just took so long that it didn't have any effect. So don't blame me. I didn't do anything wrong. And you say?
Well, I say, again, a little, too late. And again, imagine if the shoe were on the other foot. Imagine if a Republican, say Larry Craig, had a gay partner on the federal or on the agency that he was charged with regulating. Even if he only had a voice, even if he wasn't the chairman, wouldn't it behoove that member to recuse themselves or at least declare the possibility of a conflict of interest? This didn't happen. Barney Frank continued to have this relationship and continued to work on this committee. At the time, it was called the Banking Committee, and the press didn't raise an eyebrow. If you switch that around and put in a Republican, even if it wasn't a gay relationship, so let's say a Republican had a mistress or a wife or a girlfriend on an agency that Republican was supposed to be regulating, the press would go ballistic. But because it's Barney Frank and because it's a Democrat and because it's the whole gay thing, they have not touched it because they consider it radioactive.
Did Frank basically do anything wrong? Is there a conflict of interest, or is there a trail back that says Barney Frank did this wrong? Now, I hold him accountable because he won't admit that he did a poor job in overseeing, and then in July, and we played this bite in July, he basically put a happy face on it. Oh, it's not the best investment, but it's solid and we're going forward, blah, blah, blah. Bull. But did he do anything wrong?
I don't think he did anything technically illegal. You can quarrel with his judgment in blocking people from imposing regulations on Fannie and Freddie. For example, there was one example where they wanted to put in a regulation that would tighten up mortgage rules, and Barney Frank was arguing that they ought to be loosened for example, two-family homes and three-family homes.
He wanted more money to go to poor and lower middle-class people, so we know he admitted that. All right. The guy that I do think did something wrong is Dodd. He's the Senate Finance Chairman, and he took that cheap mortgage from Countrywide Credit, didn't tell anybody. Dodd keeping a rather low profile. Now, against Frank comes in and says, oh, no, I didn't do anything wrong. Dodd, he's kind of hiding here, but I think taking that mortgage, that was outrageous.
Well, there was actually several mortgages where he got sweetheart deals that would add up to something like $75,000 over the lives of these mortgages. Now, he said, well, I just assumed that was a courtesy and didn't think it was anything out of the ordinary. I think a lot of us ordinary Americans would love to have that kind of a courtesy.
Well, could you prosecute him for that, though? I mean, I know that they're investigating all these guys now, but if you take a mortgage like that below, talk about subprime, and it's a courtesy? What do you mean a courtesy?
Well,
you're the Senate Finance Chairman.
Keep in mind that Dodd has taken $21,000 from Countrywide's Political Action Committee since 1997.
But that's
keep in
legal.
Mind, that's legal, but the FBI has opened an investigation into possible securities fraud, mortgage fraud at Countrywide. I don't think we've heard the last of the Chris Dodd involvement in this.
See, that bothers me more than Frank. Frank bothers me because he's just such a partisan and he's dishonest in the fact that he said he didn't do anything wrong. He did, or inefficient. But Dodd taking the money, whoa.
Yeah. Well, it looks bad because Countrywide not only was making these loans available to people who shouldn't be getting them, on the other side of the spectrum, they're giving sweetheart deals to people who probably don't need them and who are supposed to be regulating them.
And then it goes bankrupt. So they shouldn't be giving sweetheart deals to anybody. They don't have any money.
Exactly.